So we will continue with the third chapter. Abhay had been a devotee of Lord Chaitanya since childhood, and he was familiar with the life of Lord Chaitanya through the well-known scriptures Chaitanya Charitamrit and Chaitanya Bhagavat. He had learned of Lord Chaitanya not only as the most ecstatic form of a pure devotee who had spread the chanting of the holy name to all parts of India, but also as the direct appearance of Sri Krishna himself in the form of Radha and Krishna combined. But now, for the first time, Abhay was in touch with the great wealth of literature compiled by the Lord's immediate associates and followers, passed down in disciplic succession and expanded on by great authorities. Lord Chaitanya's immediate followers, Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Sanatan Goswami, Srila Jeev Goswami, and others, had compiled many volumes based on the Vedic scriptures and proving conclusively that Lord Chaitanya's teachings were the essence of Vedic wisdom. There were many books not yet published, but Srila Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati was intent on establishing many presses just to release the sound of the Brihad Mridanga for the benefit of all people. Srila Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati was teaching the conclusion of Lord Chaitanya's teachings that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and that the chanting of his holy name should be stressed above all other religious practices. In former ages, other methods of attaining to God had been available, but in the present age of Kali, only the chanting of Hare Krishna would be effective. On the authority of the scriptures such as the Brihad Naradiya Puran and the Upanishads, Bhakti Vinod Thakur had specifically cited the Mahamantra Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Lord Krishna himself had confirmed in Bhagavad Gita that the only method of attaining him was devotional service. Abandon all varieties of religion and just render unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. Abhay knew these verses, he knew the chanting, and he knew the conclusions of the Gita. But now, as he eagerly read the writings of the great Acharyas, he had fresh realizations of the scope of Lord Chaitanya's mission. Now he was discovering the depth of his own Vaishnav heritage and its efficacy for bringing about the highest welfare for people in an age destined to be full of troubles. Srila Bhakti Siddhant was often traveling, and Abhay was busy with his family and business, so to arrange another meeting was not possible. Yet from their first encounter, Abhay had considered Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati his spiritual master, and Abhay began thinking of him always. I have met such a nice, saintly person. Whenever possible, Abhay would seek out Srila Bhakti Siddhant's disciples, the member of the Gaudiya Math. As for Gandhi's movement, Gandhi had suffered a bitter setback when his non-violent followers had blundered and committed violence during a protest. The British had taken the opportunity to arrest Gandhi and sentence him to 6 years in jail. Although his followers still revered him, the nationalist movement had lost much of its impetus. But regardless of that, Abhay was no longer interested. Srila Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati had defeated his idea that the nationalist cause was India's first priority. He had invoked Abhay's original Krishna consciousness, and Abhay now felt confident that Bhakti Siddhant's mission was the real priority. Srila Bhakti Siddhant had invited him to preach, and from that moment, Abhay had wanted to join the Gaudiya Math as one of Srila Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati's disciples. But now, instead of his political inclination, it was his family obligations that stood in the way. He was no longer thinking, first, let us become an independent nation, then preach about Lord Chaitanya. Now he was thinking, I cannot take part like the others. I have my family responsibilities. And the family was growing. In 1921, Abhay and his wife had their first child, a son, and there would be more children and more income would be needed. Earning money meant sacrificing time and energy, and it meant, at least externally, being distracted from the mission of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. Indian culture had the highest regard for the family institution, and divorce was unheard of. Even if a man was in great financial difficulty, he would remain with his wife and children. Although Abe expressed regret at not being a sannyasi disciple in the Gaudiya Math, he never seriously considered leaving his young wife so early in their marriage. Gaur Mohan was pleased to hear of his son's attraction to a Vaishnav guru, but he never expected Abhay to abandon responsibilities and enter the renounced order. A Vaishnav could remain with wife and family, practice spiritual life at home, and even become active in preaching. Abhay would have to find ways to serve the mission of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati as a family man. Abhay thought that if he were to become very successful in business, then he could spend money not only to support his family but also to help support Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati mission of spreading Krishna consciousness. An astrologer had even predicted that Abhay would become one of the wealthiest men in India. But with his present income, he could do little more than provide for his family's needs. He thought he might do better by trying to develop a business on his own. Abhay expressed his feelings to Dr. Bose, who listened like a sympathetic father and suggested that Abhay become his agent for all of northern India. Abhay could purchase medicines, liniments, rectified spirits, toothpaste, and other items wholesale from Dr. Bose's factory and travel widely throughout northern India, building up his own business. Also, Abe had enough experience with Bose's laboratory that he could try to make and market some of his own medicines and products. Dr. Bose and Abe decided that the centrally located city of Allahabad would be a good place for Abe to make his headquarters. In 1923, Abe and his wife and child moved to Allahabad, a 12-hour train ride northwest from Calcutta. The British had once made Allahabad the capital of the United Provinces, and they had built many good buildings there, including buildings for a high court and a university. Europeans and affluent Indian families like the Nehrus lived in a modern paved, well lit section of town. There was also another, older section with ancient narrow streets closely lined with buildings and shops. Many Bengalis resided there, and it was there that Abe decided to settle his family. He had chosen Allahabad, traditionally known as Prayag, as a good location for business, but it was also one of India's most famous places of pilgrimage. Situated at the confluence of the three holiest rivers of India, the Ganges, the Yamuna, and the Saraswati, Allahabad was the site of two of India's most widely attended spiritual events, the annual Magh Mela and the Kumbh Mela, which took place every 12 years. And in search of spiritual purification, millions of pilgrims from all over India would converge here each year at the time of the full moon in the month of Magh and bathe at the junction of the three sacred rivers. Abe's home at 60 Badshahi Mundi consisted of a few rented rooms. For his business, he rented a small shop in the commercial center of the city at Johnston Gung Road, where he opened his dispensary, Prayag Pharmacy, and began selling medicines, tinctures, syrups, and other products manufactured by Bose Laboratory. He met an Allahabad physician, Dr. Ghosh, who was interested in a business partnership. So Abhay asked him to become his attending physician and move his office to Prayag Pharmacy. Dr. Ghosh consented and closed his own shop, Tropical Pharmacy. At Prayag Pharmacy, Dr. Ghosh would diagnose patient and give medical prescription, which Abhay would fill. Dr. Ghosh would then receive a 25% commission from the sale of the prescriptions. Abhay and Dr. Ghosh became friends. They would visit at each other's home and they treated each other's children like their own family members. Often they discussed their aspirations for increasing profits. Dr. Ghosh. Abe was a business minded man. We were all God fearing, of course, In every home, we have a small temple, and we must have deities. But he used to always talk about business and how to meet family expenses. Although at home Abhay wore a kurta and dhoti, sometimes for business he would dress in shirt and pants. He was a good looking, full mustached, energetic young man in his late 20s. He and Radharani, they now had two children. A daughter was born after they had been in Allahabad 1 year. Gaur Mohan, who was now 75, had come to live with him, as had Abhay's widowed sister Rajeshwari and her son Tulsi. Gaur Mohan mostly stayed at home, chanted on his beads, and worshipped the Shaligram Shila deity of Krishna. He was satisfied that Abhay was doing right, and Abhay was satisfied to have his father living comfortably with him and freely worshipping Krishna. Abhay led a busy life. He was intent on building his business. By 8 a.m., he would go to his pharmacy, where he would meet Dr. Ghosh and begin his day's work. At noon, he would come home and then he would return to the pharmacy in the late afternoon. He had purchased a large Buick for 8,000 rupees, and although he never drove it himself, he let his nephew, a good driver, use it for his taxi business. Occasionally, Abhay would use the car on his own business excursions, and his nephew would then act as his chauffeur. It so happened that both Motilal Nehru and his son Jawaharlal were customers at Prayag Pharmacy. Because Jawaharlal would always order Western medicines, Abhay thought he must have felt that Indian ways were inferior. Once Jawaharlal approached Abhay for a political contribution and Abhay donated. Being a conscientious merchant, during the day Abhay would talk with his customers and other friends who would stop by, and they would tell him many things. A former military officer used to tell Abhay stories of World War I. He told how Marshal Foch in France had one day ordered the killing of thousands of Belgian refugees whose maintenance had become a burden to him on the battlefield. A Mohammedan gentleman, a member of a royal family in Afghanistan, would come daily with his son to sit and chat. Abhay would listen to his visitors and converse pleasantly and make up their prescriptions, but his thoughts kept returning to his meeting with Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati. He went over it again and again in his mind, how he had looked, his mannerisms, what he had said. At night, Abhay would go home to his wife and children. Radharani was a chaste and faithful wife who spent her days cooking, cleaning, and caring for her two children. But she was not inclined to share her husband's interest in things spiritual. He could not convey to her his feelings about Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati. Abhay, his wife, their two children, Gaur Mohan, Abhay's younger brother Krishna Charan, Abhay's widowed sister Rajeshwari, and her son Tulsidas all went together to an Allahabad studio for a family portrait. The photo shows Abhay in his late 20s. He is thin and dark with a full mustache. His forehead is broad, his eyes dark and clear. He wears a white kurta and dhoti and a plain dark slippers. He sits in a chair, his wife standing behind him, an attractive young woman in a white khadi sari with a line of color on the border. Her slim arm rests behind Abhay's head on the back of his chair, her small hand gripping the edge of the chair. Her left hand hangs by her side, gripped in a fist. She is barefoot. With his left hand, Abhay steadies his 2-year-old boy, Pacha, Prayagraj, a glaring infant on his lap. The boy seeming to squirm, his baby legs and bare feet dangling by his mother's knee. Abhay seems a bit amused by the son on his lap. Abhay is a handsome Indian man, his wife an attractive woman, both young. Also behind Abhay stands his nephew Tulsi and his brother Krishna Charan. Sitting on the far right is Abhay's sister Rajeshwari, dressed in a widow's white sari, holding Sulakshman, Abhay's daughter, on her lap. Sulakshmana is also squirming, her foot jutting towards the photographer. In the center sits Gaur Mohan. His face is shriveled and his whole body is emaciated with age. He is also wearing a white kurta and dhoti. His hands seem to be moving actively on his lap, perhaps with palsy. He is short and smart and old. Abhi traveled frequently throughout northern India, intent on explaining his sales. It was not unusual for him to be gone a few days in a week and sometimes a week or more at a time. As he traveled from one city to another, the pharmaceutical industry was just beginning in India, and doctors, hospitals, and pharmacies were eager to buy from the competent, gentlemanly agent who called on them from Bose's laboratory of Calcutta. He would travel by train and stay in hotels. He liked the feeling of freedom from home that traveling afforded. But the real drive was servicing accounts and getting new ones. That was his business. Riding in a third class unreserved compartment was often uncomfortable. The only seats were benches, which were often dirty, and passengers were permitted to crowd on without reservations. But that is how Abe traveled, hundreds of miles every week. As the train moved between towns, he would see the numberless small villages and then the country land that spread out before him on either side of the tracks. At every stop, he would hear the cries of the tea vendors as they walked alongside the train windows. Chai, chai, tea. The had introduced it, and now millions of Indians were convinced that they could not get through the morning without their little glass of hot tea. As a strict Vaishnav, Abhay never touched it, but his wife, much to his displeasure, was becoming a regular tea drinker. Although Abhay was accustomed to dressing as a European businessman, he never compromised his strict Vaishnav principles. Most of his fellow Bengalis had taken up fish eating, but Abhay was always careful to avoid non Vaishnav foods even at hotels. Once at a vegetarian hotel, the Empire Hindu Hotel in Bombay, he was served onions, and sometimes hotel people tried to serve him mushrooms, garlic, and even eggs. But all of these he carefully avoided. Keeping a small semblance of his home routine, he would take his bath early in the morning with cold water. He followed this routine year around, and when in Saharanpur, he did so during the bitter cold weather. The hotel keeper was greatly surprised. Abhay conversed with many people in his travels. A doctor in Dhaka told him that on his way to the office he had passed a farmer talking to a friend and could tell by the sound of the farmer's cough that the farmer would die within a few hours. Another doctor told Abhay that he had just come from seeing a pneumonia patient who was defying nature and medical science by continuing to live. He met a Muhammad doctor in Gaya who lamented that he had just lost a patient, although he had given the man the very best medicine. Such accounts from men of the medical profession confirmed Abey's conviction that without God's sanction, no one could be saved. Not that he ever thought of his medical sales as philanthropic work, Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati had already convinced him that the only way to save a person was by giving him Krishna consciousness. Abey's medical products were strictly for business. On one business trip, it was in 1925, he traveled through Agra, only 40 miles south of Vrindavan. Taking the opportunity, he made his first visit to holy Vrindavan, fulfilling his childhood aspiration. He loved the sight of Vrindavan, but he could spend only a day or two. Even a single day away from his sales work could be critical. As a reverend pilgrim, Abhay visited a few temples, especially the principal temples established by the followers of Lord Chaitanya, but he had to move on. There were also risks in traveling. Once he was sitting in a train compartment in Mathura station when a monkey suddenly entered and took away his belongings. Early one morning before dawn, while he was on his way to Kanpur in a two-wheeled horse carriage, the horse was going at a fast trot when suddenly it hit a large heap of rubbish in the middle of the road. The carriage turned upside down. Horse, driver, and carriage all landed in a heap, and Abe was thrown into the air. But he landed unharmed, feeling as though he had just changed to another seat. Because Abe sat but said nothing. The driver thought he had been knocked unconscious and become anxious. The passenger was all right, however, and the driver considered it a miracle, since the cart had so violently ejected him. Abhay took it that he had been saved by Krishna, and he remembered similar incidents starting with his childhood when his clothing had caught on fire. Krishna had always protected him. For 5 years, Abhay travelled widely out of Allahabad, and when he was home, he put in long hours at the dispensary. But he also spent time with his wife and played with his children. Srila Prabhupada. When my son was about 2 years old, he was very naughty, always doing some mischief. My friends used to visit me and call my son Pacha. Pacha, if you sit down for 1 minute silently, I will give you a gift. But the boy failed. He could not sit down, even for a minute. There was a table fan, and Pacha was wanting to touch it. I said, no, no, don't touch. But again he tried to touch it. So my friend said, just lower the speed and let him touch it. So I unplugged the fan, and then he touched it. It did not harm him, but it hit his finger with a loud noise. Tung! And then he would not touch again. I would ask him, touch again, but he would not. As soon as his daughter, Sulakshmana, could speak, he began teaching her the Bengali translation of the prayer Gurvakshtam, which begins, the spiritual master is receiving benedictions from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it. The spiritual master extinguishes the blazing fire of material life or repeated birth and death. Except for his obligatory travels, Abhay stayed at home and satisfied his family. He tended diligently to his business and it prospered. It was Kumbh Mela, January 1928. Bhakti Pradipa Tirth Maharaj of the Gaudiya Math had come to Allahabad with a few men. One day he walked unannounced into the Prayag pharmacy, and all of a sudden Abhay was seeing them again and again after so many years. Oh, these are the people I saw before, he thought. Gaudiya Math, yes, come in. Bhakti Bhakti Pradipa Tirth Swami was the same sannyasi who had visited Narendranath Malik in Calcutta, a visit that had led to Abhay's going to visit Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. Folding his palms in a humble gesture, standing before Abhay in simple saffron khadi robes, his shaven head with the tuft of shikha in the back, his forehead marked with Vaishnav Tilak, Tirath Maharaj said to Abhay, we are new here. We are going to establish a temple in Allahabad. We have heard your name, so we have come to you. Please help us. Abhay was joyful. Yes, I will help you. He contributed that money he could and then introduced Tirath Maharaj to Dr. Ghosh, who also contributed. Abhay invited the Gaudiya Math devotees to come to his home and hold a bhajan and lecture. His wife would cook prasadam. They accepted. But when they arrived, there was a misunderstanding. Gaur Mohan, who was invalid, was staying in his room upstairs. Please come down, Abhay called. There's a meeting of the Gaudiya Math. Gaur Mohan came downstairs. But when he saw the sadhus, he mistook them for impersonalists from a non-devotional mission. He had not heard correctly what Abhay had said. Gaur Mohan took his seat, but he observed the saffron-clothed men sullenly and even made a critical remark. Abhay, who was enlivened at the opportunity to associate with the Vaishnavas and hear from them Krishna Katha, could not understand his father's behavior. Then, as soon as Bhakti Pradeep Tirath Swami began his lecture, Gaur Mohan understood. Oh, they are Vaishnavas, he cried. Old and invalid as he was, he immediately fell down at their feet. I misunderstood you, sir. I thought you were sannyasis from another mission. I am glad to meet you. After Kumbh Mela, Pradeep Tirth Swami left, but 5 or 6 brahmachari disciples of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati stayed on in Allahabad, maintaining a small mutt headquarters. They worshipped the deity, held an evening program of the kirtan and lecture, and preached actively to the local people. The devotee in charge, Atulananda Brahmachari, would visit the homes of Allahabad citizens, trying to solicit subscriber members for the Mutt. For half a rupee per month, a person would receive a subscription to the Gaudiya Mutt magazine. In the course of his door-to-door soliciting, Atul Nanda knocked on the door of Abhay Charan Day. Abhay received him very hospitably and offered him some rice and fruit. Abhay was very receptive to the philosophy and relished discussions with Atulunanda, who made it a point to visit Mr. Day repeatedly, and speak with him about Lord Chaitanya and the Bhagavad Gita. Abhay also inquired into the recent activities of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. By now, Srila Bhakti Siddhant had established the Gaudiya printing works in Calcutta and had begun to publish the Srimad Bhagavatam in several volumes with his own annotations. He had also published an edited version of Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat from his center in Dhaka. He had opened centers in Bhubaneswar, Madras, and Puri. Abhay's interest was insatiable. Atul Nanda told him how in 1925 Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had led a big procession circumambulating the holy land of Navdvip with deities riding on the backs of gorgeously decorated elephants and with devotees from all parts of India attending. Envious professional priests who opposed Srila Bhakti Siddhant's acceptance of disciples from all castes had employed a gang to help them hurl bricks and rocks on the procession. But Srila Bhakti Siddhant had continued undaunted. In 1926, he had toured throughout India, preaching the message of Lord Chaitanya. He had also installed deities in the large temple of Sri Chaitanya Mutt in Mayapur. And a year ago, he had begun publishing his magazine Sajan Toshani in three languages, including an English edition called The Harmonist. After several visits and hours of discussion on the activities and philosophies of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Atulanda brought Mr. Day to the Allahabad ashram. Shortly thereafter, the mutt relocated to a rented house on South Malacca Street near Rambagh, just a short walk from Abhay's house. Now it was possible for Abhay to visit every evening. After work, he would attend the mutt, where he would play the mridanga, surprising the brahmacharis with his already developed mridanga playing skills. He sang bhajans with them and sometimes took the lead part in the congregational singing. He would also bring important persons from Allahabad to visit the mutt. For the brahmacharis, Abhay seemed to give new life to their ashram, and for Abhay, new life had come to him in his reunion with the disciples of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. In 1930, Gaur Mohan's health took a turn for the worse, and his family members gathered around him, thinking that his end had come. Abhay had been in Bombay on business, and it was late when he reached Allahabad and knocked on the door. Gaur Mohan told his daughter Rajeshwari, "Open the door, Abhay has come." She replied, "No, he is in Bombay." Gaur Mohan repeated, "I tell you that he has come. You open the door." It was about midnight. She went downstairs, opened the door, and found that her brother had indeed come. Abhay went to his father. "How are you?" "I am all right." Gaur Mohan replied, "You just take rest for the night." The next morning, Abhay called the doctor. "How your father is living, we don't know," the doctor told him. "He has practically no pulse. He has been living without food for several months." Abhay asked his father, "What is your wish? Tell me." "Why are you asking?" His father replied. "Has the doctor told you anything?" Abhay said, "No. I am asking because I am staying in Bombay and you are here. So if you have any wish, any intention, let me know. I am here. I am here for you." Gormohan told him to give their cow to the Allahabad Gaudiya Mutt. So Abhay took the cow along with her calf and donated them to Mutt. Then again he asked his father, "Have you got any other wish?" And again his father asked, "Has the doctor told you anything?" "No, no. I'm simply asking because for my business I have to go." Then Gaur Mohan said, "Invite all the Gaudiya Vaishnavas of Allahabad and other Vaishnavas also. Let them chant Harinam in the evening and you supply them with good food. That is my wish." Abhay arranged it, and in the evening the Harinam started. At 11 o'clock, All of them took prasadam and left. That night, Gaur Mohan passed away. Abhay felt the loss of his father painfully. His father had given him everything he had ever wanted, had been careful to raise him as a pure Vaishnav, and had always worshipped Radha and Krishna. Although Abhay was a competent young man, he felt lost without his dearmost protector and friend. More than anyone else, Gaur was the one who had always guided Abhay and treated him as the most special person. Without his father, Abhay now felt hopeless. He suddenly felt the same dependency he had felt as a small boy, but now without his father. The one who had always treated him as a pet son, deserving all loving attention. The one who had given him whatever he had wanted, and who had literally prayed to every holy man he met that his son become a great devotee of Srimati Radharani. That best well wisher was now gone. On the day of Shraddh, 13 days after God Mohan passed away, Abhay and his father posed for a formal photograph. In accordance with the religious custom, the two sons had shaved their heads. The photograph shows Abhay and his brother sitting on either side of a formal portrait of their father. The portrait is on an elevated stand and is surrounded with dark cloth. The picture is nicely framed. Gormohan looks old but still thoughtful and intent. Not so old as in the former portrait, where he had looked emaciated with eyes almost dimmed. Abhay, with his head shaved, looks like a renounced monk, and his body is covered with the robes of a monk. Simple drapes in broad folds covering the upper and lower parts of his body. He looks quite different than he had in the picture that was taken in the same place with the same rough carpet on the floor years before. In that picture, with his wife and children gathered around him, he was very much the young householder surrounded by his responsibilities of family and looking like he knew how to conduct himself well and move energetically in the world. But in this photo, although his children are present, they are seated unattended on the floor. Abey's left hand is on his knee, poised and yet at rest, whereas in the former picture, his left hand had been holding his restless son. Abey's wife is not present. In this picture, Abey looks striking. One cannot tell that he usually has a head of hair and a mustache, which he has only recently shorn for the mournful observance of his father's passing away. Instead, this seems to be his natural appearance. There is a mysterious spiritual air about him, as one might expect in a meditating saint. His look is neither agitated nor cheerful nor sorrowful. It is peaceful and knowing, as if he has suddenly become a sadhu on the day his father has passed away. He looks like the sadhu his father envisioned he would become. He looks as if he is and always was a sadhu and has suddenly been revealed as such on this day. Even by the most casual inspection of the photo, it appears that by shaving his head and dressing in robes with no shirts or shoes, Abhay has become a sadhu. Hare Krishna. So this is the end of third chapter. We will start fourth chapter in our next turn. Hare Krishna.